Well, today I am joined by the phenomenal visionary Elaine Gross, who has worked for 21 years as the founding president of Erase Racism, the civil rights organization based on New York's Long Island. Thank you for your work and congratulations on your retirement. I hope it's an exciting time for you.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me and for your comments about my work. And yes, it is an exciting time. It is a difficult time. Transitions are always difficult, and there are a million things to do, but it's exciting and it's all good.
I love to hear that. And, I think even with our audience, the fact that a part of your retirement and transition has included selling your home, which we'll talk about later. But our audience, we probably get more than anyone else that one of the top five stressors, according to psychologists, is moving and then career change. So you're doing a lot. And again, I appreciate your time and I just hope it's smooth. Everything is smooth for you.
Thank you.
Uh, and we were talking a little bit prior to filming about your own experience with your real estate professional. Tell us a little bit more about that because I think it gives great insight into this topic.
Mhm. So I certainly have had experience, and this was quite a while ago, and it wasn't even in New York State, it was in Massachusetts, when I was discriminated against. And at the time, I was looking to rent an apartment. But more recently, as part of this transition, I had to sell my house before I went on to buy another house. And I had heard of a realtor who had reached out to Erase Racism earlier on, wanting to be supportive of the organization, et cetera. And so when I went to sell my house, I thought of him. Michael Sadis is his name. I thought of him, and I chuckled when I first met him. He said, I tell everyone who's seeking to list a house with me, and this is before he knew that I wasn't looking to list at that time. He said, I tell everyone that if they're breathing and they have the money, then I want to sell them that house. And basically saying, no nonsense to the people who are coming to him. You're going to work with me. This is my bottom line. And I was really impressed with that attitude. And so that made me choose him when I listed my house.
That's such a heartwarming story and a great example of how we as really real estate professionals really should be conducting our business.
Mhm.
But as we get into today's discussion, let me frame it a little bit for our audience. You have generously shared the lessons you've learned from your 21 years of service. So today, again, I'm just so honored that we can glean from your practical insights for serving our communities as real estate professionals, whether we're agents or brokers, lenders, appraisers, and the like. And it's not lost on me or probably anyone in our audience that although to some, it may seem that unfair housing, specifically racism, ended. Apparently, some people think it was like poof, bam, boom, magical. Once the Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968 was enacted, it's not lost on us that the Newsday expose of Long Island, your stomping ground, has been one of the most prominent and extensive news stories to highlight discrimination does still happen. It is still a modern day thing. And really, as quiet as it is kept, it's not just on Long Island. And that's what's important for our audience, which is likely nationwide and even global. So, what's of interest is that we, the National Association of Realtors, we have this moniker of being America's largest trade association. We have had a Realtor Political Action Committee since 1969. We call it RPAC. We've even hired our first lobbyist back in 1973. Yet, it's no secret that the US government, federal and local, they've been a part of unfair housing. They've been at the very least complicit, but sometimes perpetuators, right? And that's even today. Over the past summer, I've been posting on my Instagram page current modern day instances, which to me is very problematic. Um, so at any rate, it's interesting to see that these lines between fair and unfair housing, they're still being blurred. So I'm saying all of this to say, I think that as one of the largest trade associations in America, we not only have the power, but we have a responsibility. Let me backtrack a little bit. Tell me a little bit more about your story.
That's a wonderful story because I had a prior relationship with the executive director at the Long Island Community Foundation when I was a grant maker. And then she reached out to me and basically posed a dilemma. She was interested in helping her donors who were asking questions about prejudice and diversity and what's happening on Long Island, et cetera. Long story short, I was hired as a consultant initially. I came back with a recommendation that the foundation really look at institutional and structural racism, meaning what are the policy impediments to racial equity? What are the laws that might be impediments? What are the ways that various institutions or governments might be acting to actually impede racial equity? And then from that, obviously, housing was the first issue that we tackled, given that when you look at Long Island, where I've been working, looking at Black white residential segregation, we're the 10th most racially segregated metro region in the United States. So where did that come from? And why was it so persistent? And so that's why we did the research we did around the government's role, and I should say federal government and local government and other institutions, banks, real estate agents, et cetera, developers. That's why we did that research and also looked at fair housing enforcement. And we did the early reports that said, wait a minute, the government is not enforcing fair housing laws, and then kept at it over the years and created a statewide coalition actually that pushed for source of income as a protected characteristic. That got passed in 2019 at the state level. And, very important because people were being told, oh, no, we don't take any programs. We don't, as a way of, and sometimes, a lot of times, that was really racial discrimination that was going on, but it was a convenient way to say, oh, no, well, we won't be able to take you. And so I'm very proud of the way in which we have stuck to it, the various iterations of ways that people continue to discriminate. And we've been able to make some progress, especially because of the conversation I had with the Newsday publisher, which prompted them to take on that investigation, which then impacted the New York State Senate. 3 committees carried out their own investigation, invited me and Fred Freiberg, who at the time was the director for the Fair Housing Justice Center. We were expert witnesses at those hearings and offering recommendations to them, and they took us up on those recommendations, which became some 10 laws that were passed and bills passed into law in 2021. So, there is progress. I'd like to make sure that people understand that, but it is disappointing that there are so many people who still are not embracing fair housing. That's why they come up with all the excuses for their behavior. And of course, to protect themselves, they say, oh, no, I'm not discriminating. They know they are. But they come up with all of these rationalizations. And because they, deep down, they haven't really embraced fair housing. They really believe some of the myths or misinformation that say that, Black people, Latinos, you really don't want them in your community, in your neighborhood. They belong over there. White people belong over here. They embrace that at some level, which is why they do not stand firm to say, I am not going to discriminate based on any of the characteristics that are in the fair housing statutes, most especially race, that has the longest and most persistent discrimination.
This is such an amazing journey just to even hear about, because what I'm thinking about is there's been a handful of people, so your organization, like you mentioned, as well as others, but again, still kind of a handful of people that have not only impacted their state laws when it comes to fair housing being taken more seriously, but this is again a national conversation. So for my final question, I'd love to know for you, what are your recommendations for those of us that do champion fair housing? And to your point, it really does, what I'm getting is, sometimes we feel like we need this army, and if it's not majority of the people rallying with us, then nothing can change. But change has happened. even though it might have been this remnant, right, that was really striving for this. So for those of us that champion fair housing, what are some things that maybe should be on our radar?
Mhm. So, yes, it is a very important point that change can happen without an army. And it has, it frequently has. It takes leadership. And so I know that you have a lobbying arm. That lobbying arm should have on its agenda making sure that every single state has a robust, fair housing enforcement going on. And you should be encouraging whatever the configuration is in that state. In New York State, I know it's part of the New York State Department of State, the licensing division. Make sure that they are active because they were into this. Oh, we don't do fair housing enforcement. Yes, but you have ethical responsibilities for people who you license, and if they are violating the fair housing statutes, then they don't need a license. Right? And so, and I know that that is not a that's not a an exception. I know from our colleagues across the nation that robust enforcement has not been the norm. So, if your lobbying could be certainly at the federal level, but also make sure that the states are doing what they should be doing, and make sure that your membership knows. Sometimes members are more concerned about what might happen with their colleagues. They don't want to be seen as on the outside. And so a little shame can go a long way. And if you're sending a message that says, make it clear to your colleagues that that behavior is not acceptable. And if they're in a little group with you that goes to dinner, once a month or something, those are not people who you want in your circle. Those are not people you want in your circle, and you should tell the licensing agency what you know. And that I realize that takes some courage. People would rather say, I like to mind my own business. I just keep my head down. But no, people need to be much clearer that this is where we stand, this is what we do, and it's not okay not to be in with the leadership.
Well, there you have it, folks. We have the expert Elaine Gross giving us what we need to do to make sure fair housing is truly realized in our communities. Thank you again for just your time today.
You're very welcome. Pleasure to be with you. And I wish you all the best with your efforts.
Thank you so much.